You are a whisper, like the tiniest of whispers. Tiny whisper. Tiny whisper. Whisper it.
Sorry.
Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast. This is episode number 115, Happiness and Humor, and I messed it up again, Justin.
It was close.
Yeah. So
75%.
episode number 115. Episode number 115, Humor and Happiness for Developers.
What was the episode again? I missed it.
I believe it was the pursuit of happiness.
I think I'm in the wrong podcast. I wanted to talk about something different. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. We like different. So today on the panel, we have Danny Blue.
Hey, everybody.
Justin Ribeiro.
Hello, wonderful people.
Tyler Kilborn, who is new to the panel from Carfax.
Hello, everyone.
Myself, Eric Isaacson, and our guest today is Cornel Stefanache. I always butcher your last name. Even I worked with you for how long, and I still can't pronounce it correctly.
It's Stefanache. There is no problem. Nobody can pronounce it, so it's okay.
You hate me.
No, nobody can hate you. Come on.
So we brought you on today to talk about humor and happiness and kind of what you're doing as a developer with Monkey User, which is a really fun site in the spirit of XKCD. So very inspired by that from my understanding. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started?
So, yeah. I'm invited here to speak about Monkey User, my new website. It's monkeyyuser.com. We launched it. I launched it in October, half of October or something, with few comics. I don't think that it's basically a web comic series about software development and technology, but it's a little bit cruel because I just wanna reflect the reality in funny comics, and it's fully inspired by the working environment. So you should check it out if you haven't already. But it kind of exploded yesterday with a comic about testing. So it was awesome. We received a lot of positive feedback, and now I'm more than motivated to create more and more quality cartoons. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So should I go over how it all began now, or we just want to go through the entire?
We can go into how that started. To start, or we can just talk about, humor, leisure, and sanity in general for developers. Like, why are these things important? Like, who needs sanity as a developer?
So I don't think that you need sanity. I think that you need a fun environment to work with. And I think that you can have a fun environment around smart people. And as far as I know, everybody that works in the IT industry are smart people. So I really get my energy, at least I am getting the energy from fun stuff and from people. And we kind of, wherever I'm working, I'm kind of trying to create a fun environment to work on, because there can be some stressful situations that are hard to handle. But at the end of the day, if you make a clean and fun joke and everybody laughs for 10 minutes, that's a successful day. Probably 50% of the happiness comes from the fun working environment.
So does anybody else here on this call have a similar thing at work? Like, is it all fun? Is it part fun? Do we have some balance there? Like, is Cornell crazy?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I sit next to someone who usually just randomly rolls into the shot, so you can't really just, say that humor doesn't exist. In a workplace. I mean, you do have to have, bad things happen at work sometimes, right? We have bugs and we have errors and we have things that go terribly, terribly wrong. And sometimes you just got to go, meh. Because if you don't, you will go insane. Especially if you've ever had to deal with, a BRD or anything of that sort of nature where, requirements gathering becomes a thing of, it's not exactly a blissful event.
I mean, I'm sure you guys do stuff like this, but at Carfax here, we have like outings, and we go out to lunches when somebody comes and they're new, and that's nice, like to get some time where you're not really working, but you're with your coworkers, and sort of just not think about code.
I see my coworkers too much. I mean, I think that's the major gist of most of my day. I mean, I'm looking at them right now, just going, why? I mean, I kicked other people out, and this is what happens. You have to have boundaries.
Boundaries.
At the very least, we have a dartboard set up, and there's pretty much a perpetual dart tournament that goes on from time to time. But the team names change. So at the moment, it is Wawa versus Sheets, which was its own religious debate in the office for about a week. But that's pretty much what we do, and it's good because it's one of those little things that it's something else to do and gives you something else to talk about.
So just for the people who are listening who don't know what that is, what is Wawa and what is Sheets?
Oh, this is like, what are you talking about? Everybody. So they're both gas stations that serve food. And it's both of them are pretty much exactly the same, but the idea, it's like they have the little kiosk. You walk up, punch in, say I want this, you pick it up, you pay for it, and then you just pick it up and go. But there are usually, wherever there is a Wawa, there is not a Sheets, and vice versa. So people get very attached to whichever they grew up around.
Yeah, it sounds like the debates between semicolons and no semicolons. Very heated.
So, Eric, coming back to your idea about new people, have you ever had initiation rituals, like messing up with new people?
I have not encountered that in the workplace, although I was in a fraternity, or I still am in a fraternity, I guess. As an alumni, I am now. And so I have witnessed that. But I have not witnessed it at workplaces I've been at. So I don't know if that's good or bad. Do you have any cool stories?
I don't think that it's really a cool story, but we're trying to. So I have a really good friend that we're both good at acting. So whenever somebody is new and somebody does not know about what we're doing and how we are getting along, we start arguing, but really loud, and threaten each other, and then everybody is like shocked, what's happening, and trying to. So it happened a few times when people were like, "Whoa, just a second, please." And we kind of once we kind of messed with a trainer. We had a team building somewhere in the mountains with the entire team, and the trainer tried to create a game for us to create the team spirit. But at one point it was getting really, really boring, and I was like, okay, we will have to spice this up. So I acted like I'm really nervous, and a friend got into the place, and he was laughing. He was like, "What you're doing, man? Come on, stop it!" And we started arguing, and everybody was shocked. And we went like this for 10 minutes or so, and everybody was.
And I miss working with you.
So I think that the only people that had fun was me and my friend, but at least I had fun. Come on.
I've done stuff like that in malls, right? Where you freak people out, starting arguments, or like I went on a payphone, if anyone remembers what those are, and I was like, I started pretending I was doing some crazy drug deal or something, just to see what people would say. And I mean, as an actor, like, as I used to do a lot of acting, that was a lot of fun. But the downside is, you rarely get a chance to tell people the joke because they bolt right away.
We need to do that at Carfax, where you're just on the headset with someone just saying, "Man, we just lost like all this production data, like just outside like the PM's office." You just start freaking people out.
Yeah, like the new person who's there, be like, "And it's a commit from you, so we're trying to understand what you did there. Can you tell us about that? We're going to go into the meeting with the CEO. Can you bring all your stuff up there?" That'd be pretty cool. It's cruel. Like, some people don't think that's funny, but I mean, it's like it's debatable too, because there is a line, and everyone's line is a little different. So on Monkey User, you want to tell us a little bit about how you started it, why you started it, like what?
So I think that I have an aggressive ADHD, and whenever it all started with long, boring meetings. We all have them, right? So I always do them. This is my way to focus. So I was doodling and got good at it. And sometime in September, I think I had to do a training in Belgium, and I had a bad connection for the airplanes, and I had to stay 8 hours in Germany in the airport. So I bought myself a pen, and I bought myself a small notebook. I think that I don't have it here, and start doodling funny stuff. And I was showing it to my friend, and she was saying, "Oh, this is quite good. This is nice." So this is how it all started. I kind of wanted to do this for a long time, but not really work related. So yeah, this is how it started. But actually Monkey User. Why Monkey User? Monkey User is because it's not about me and just drawing. Everything that you'll see there is everybody's credit. Everybody that I work with now. So I have, just let me show you one of the. Have you seen the latest comic?
Yeah, I have.
Actually, not the latest. The one that was really. Just let me show my screens, because you will find the same thing that I found when creating this. Oh, let me see. So that was funny. It's like what happens when you're trying to do testing. It's alpha testing. Everything breaks. It's beta testing. Something breaks. It's on test automation. Something happens. You just kind of wait infinitely for things to load. You do some stuff. It kind of works. You see the nail here. It's upside down, and you never know what happened because everything happens so fast. Stress test is just like you just throw things out there to see if it breaks. It's an end-to-end test. It's like here you hit the nail with the plank because you're trying to do something wrong, and the manual testing, the painful manual testing, So
that one was my favorite.
Yeah. So just let me know if there is somebody from you guys that didn't felt at least one time what you have seen in this comic. So it's like even
my QA was fine with it.
Really? It was like
jokingly, of course, as they cried under their desk. So it's going to vary based on, I think, person for sure. Everyone, a lot of people who come into the business sort of programming and development don't necessarily have the same perspective, right? You end up with people who haven't yet felt those things. I mean, if I show those to my oldest daughter, she's going to go, seems fine to me. I'm like, I don't have to deal with any of this. Time jades a programmer's soul after some amount of years, I suppose. And for those, sort of painful moments, which I think the comic so perfectly sort of encloses into a tiny box, can throw off a cliff.
So another thing that was really funny, I posted the comic on Reddit. This is where it all started, and the comments are awesome. So there was one comment at one time saying that it's so painful, but it's true. That person felt the pain. So it's like there were comments saying, I have never seen a better pictorial for test automation like this one. So this is fun. So I'm having fun. Hopefully people are having fun, but it is inspired by everybody that is working in the industry.
So you said earlier that this is not just you. This is your coworkers as well, right?
It's everybody. It's the community. I had one point a comic about open source. The one where you have 6 open issues, 25 pull requests, but this is what you would expect. But actually you have 300 issues, but no pull requests. Everybody been through this when was doing open source, because probably 2/3, as Sean stated yesterday, 2/3 of the issues that they have for Webpack are just questions.
So it was inspired by XKCD, right? And XKCD What If. So and then the book as well from Randall Munroe, right?
Yeah.
So can you
recommend it.
Where do you get your inspiration from? Obviously there, because they do it, I think, 3 times a day, 3 times a week rather. They have a new cartoon, and you're doing one a day or one.
No, it's every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. On Friday, I have the ad literam stuff where you have to guess what is represented in the image. But
so it's hard to be funny, and so to be funny 3 days a week is even harder. I'm lucky if I get once a month. So, and it's definitely once every couple months usually.
I'm really lucky that I'm working with funny people, and usually when they are saying something funny, I just say stop. Am I allowed to use this in my next comic? Please. It's hard. It's hard to find inspiration. You know that Randall was a NASA engineer when he started the XKCD, and he's a really smart guy. But at one point in time, he had to quit his job to do this as a full-time. So, but the guy, it's really, really impressive. He's doing a lot of research. Whenever he's doing, a writing or a comic, he's doing a lot of research. At one point in time, in What If book, there is one story. What happens if all the water in the world will disappear starting from the Pacific Ocean? And he draws the map, what happens after 1 hour, after 4 hours, after 6 hours. And at one point in time, he calculated the water levels and how lakes will appear and everything. So this guy is doing so much research, and most of the sketches that he draws and stuff are based on real facts. So I really think that this is the most important thing, to have something based on real facts, and I don't mess around with it, to put it in a funny way, but at the same point in time to have people relate to that thing. Basically, this is the common definition of a joke.
Yeah, I think, just like XKCD, you have a picture and that tells a lot, just a single picture. And everyone can look at that in the morning and be like, oh my God, that's going to make my day. And that kind of speeds things up for the rest of the day. Little bits like that, like an example too of something small like that is there's a Twitter account, which I'm sure all of you guys are subscribed to, called I Am Developer. right? And this guy is hysterical. So there's stuff on there. If you're a web developer, there's a lot of stuff on there. You just look at it, you're like, wow, that's crazy. That's so true. And I love those little tidbits, like little tiny things that you just instantly relate with and keep going about your day.
Yeah, I'm not a, I don't know, I'm not a, I try to find, I want to find smart stuff that are a little bit challenging, funnier, rather than nine gag pictures, you know. So this is, I'm not spending any time on popular websites with cat pictures or something like that. No, but I'm seeking something that it's at the same time both funny and challenging, because you get some confirmation that you realized what the author meant when he drew that or said that. And there is another thing here. I was posting one comic probably on Tuesday, or I don't know. So I had a totally different thing in my mind, but the community just trashed it. It changed the idea of everything. It was something like I wanted to do a Half-Life reference, but everybody was doing a Morgan Freeman reference. So the community and the collective knowledge is much funnier than everybody else.
Well, it can be tough, right? I mean, no one wants to feel alone. You know, when you talk about, you know, what makes humor sort of stick, and, you know, regardless of whether you're a developer or not, you know, humor is often based in fact, right? Something that is observed in our world that sort of makes light of difficult situations. You know, why does the testing comic resound so well? Because we've all been there, right? How many of us have not, you know, laid your head on the table and weeped for, you know, a better framework or a better anything or a test harness or something? Why am I testing this button click right now? You know, that button's not wired to anything. We've all been there. Like, I don't think you go through it long enough. And sometimes you can feel absolutely alone, even while you're surrounded with tons of people. So humor sort of alleviates that stress from that, you know, often burden that we so often carry as we build things in this world.
Yeah, it's very subjective to where you sort of stand, right? So we're web developers, so we get it. We get that particular thing, but you know, like you said, your daughter Justin would not get it, right? And that's the hardest part of.
Yeah, she's not writing client code. I mean, she's writing code and having fun, and I think that's the epitome of, you know, joy. Like, you know, I think we all do it. Yeah. If you've worked in the open source community, it's not like you're being paid to work on it. Why are you working on it? Probably because you care. You kind of enjoy that thing of contributing as a, you know, a whole to not just the development community, but to society in general. So, yeah, it doesn't necessarily resonate across board. It's the same thing with, you know, cultures, right? You know, you know, and that happens in large organizations. Organizations have different types of culture that sort of defines the way people interact with one another as at a wholesale level. You know, that sort of defines the standard of where a line is, whether HR has defined it or not. You know, and the things that we sort of do that, you know, some places you can, you know, race office chairs down hallways. Other places, not so much.
So do you guys feel that there's like a productivity boost when you have this sort of open type of, you know, let's all laugh together, let's go out, or anything like, does something like Monkey User even, like just the fact that the developers go to it, does it make us more productive to be doing something like that? And I know that's going to be different answer for different people, but what are you guys' thoughts in general?
I don't think that Monkey User especially is the reason for that, but people talking about something that they relate to a comic would be a boost in productivity. So people laughing about the same thing and feeling good together. Basically, this is the idea of team building, right? You get people in one place, you make them have fun. They're going to get along together really well, you know? So this is the same thing that probably the actual comic is not the key. I've noticed that there were a lot of the difference between direct shares, visits, and I don't know, social media is a huge difference. Everybody was sharing this because they wanted to laugh together. So it's all about people. It's not about content. I think it's more about people and how they can relate together to the same event. So if it's funny, then it's better.
Yeah, and I think that transcends though into everything you do in your day too. So like if you have a good experience with that and you're coming together with the community, then you're going to be more productive in general. So indirectly, it may have that effect.
So I think that if you manage to gamify your work, then you're never going to be stressed, you know. So take new challenges and have fun building them. So this is my philosophy.
Yeah. So there's things we do at work that help us make that happen. Like where I guess gamification is one way of doing it, but there's things you can do. Like I've been rereading Andy Hunt's book on rewiring your wetworks. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. And this is like just understanding like mind maps, using techniques to keep yourself focused. I tend to have a lot of trouble with that, so I'm trying to get more exercises in the habit of that. And like the positivity that something like XKCD or Monkey User brings helps you kind of start off to jumpstart. You know, okay, now I'm gonna get in the groove and start focusing. I'm gonna take a break. Like my son, he I let him take after 10 or 15 minutes of work, I'll let him take a 2-minute break. So he can sort of decompress and then go into the next thing that he has to do when we're doing work. So I think that stuff is really important. And if on your breaks, if you get breaks, like we used to have when I worked in retail, cigarette breaks. Since I didn't smoke, I called it the bologna and cheese sandwich break. So, I mean, if you get breaks like that, then you can do things like this, like just sort of like laugh together on those breaks, or go play Mario Kart, as some people on the podcast do. I mean, do you guys do any of that stuff? Like Justin, do you have stuff at work that you do that's kind of similar?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's a strange thing, sort of, as opposed to certain industries, sort of I've been around. It's a little bit different. I mean, I've worked in a lot of companies, so, here, I, to some extent, get to define the culture because I sort of run the show. So there's big lulls. Like we have big lulls in the morning where everyone has headphones on. The people upstairs, everyone, it's just really quiet where everyone is trying to gather the problem in their head, because when you work on fairly large projects that, no bug is simple per se. You sort of have to sit there and collect yourself, and you sort of have that deep sort of problem. So things go silent. And then there's this sort of rising up of a break, so to speak, where someone breaks away from their problem or resolves something, and then people start to take their headphones off, and then you end up with that moment of levity amongst, how did your bug work out? Fine. How was yours? It was horrible. And then you kind of, move on with your day. Other places I've been, like, there isn't this, it's funny because you see all the fancy offices with all the things that you can do. I mean, we have game consoles and other random stuff too. But then you look at the overall usage and you're like, wow, a lot of that stuff doesn't get used a lot. I wonder why that is. And it has a tendency to be because everybody's working. So, and I see that at big companies too. Like you go into places, I'm like, wow, it's a great foosball table. And it's literally brand new, unused. Because people are sitting there burning, 10 to 12 hours a day building. So you kind of have to be careful, I think, when it comes to, the way that, if you're in an organization and the way your team works and sort of the culture that sort of revolves around it, how you deal with both the stress portions of it, whether humor and levity is sort of that thing, or whether a break structure that gets people away from their desk and away from their screen so that you can have interactions, which can be just as valuable to sort of understanding larger problems than, just sitting there sort of isolated in an IRC window with coworkers. You end up with different, you may end up at the same thing, but do you end up with the same level of employee or person happiness? Very difficult.
It's strange. Like, I don't know the answer to that. Like, this group that Tyler and I are in here in Virginia for Carfax is fairly new, but over in Missouri, I've observed like that in the Missouri office, they've been doing this a while, where they have a routine where they do pair programming, and then at a certain time, there's a break for 20 minutes exactly. And then there's another session of pair programming, and then another break. And it almost never deviates. And the productivity is still really, really high. Like, people are focused, they do their thing, and then they all bond together by playing video games in between or whatever. I've been at startups, though, like you said, like different where developers don't show up till 11 o'clock in the morning, and then they stay until 12 o'clock at night. But in between, they're playing foosball. But, most of us are like in startup mode where you're, like, I don't know if this place is going to be around. So I'm like uber focused. So I've been at different ways of thinking about that. And I mean, Carfax has been around for a while. So they've been doing this in not just web development, but in, database development and other types of development, doing pair programming this way. And it seems really effective. And I think Tyler and I can learn a lot from that, getting that, those breaks and getting all that.
Well, no, and you have to have that conversation, right? I mean, I don't like, as someone who came up in, cubicle land or things, in the late 90s, like, you didn't really, like, it was you got to keep in mind, like, the cultures have shifted, but at the same time, you have to be very wary of situations where work doesn't necessarily get done. Because at the end of the day, you do have to ship things. Sometimes that seems to get lost.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I go somewhere to go give a talk, or, I'm invited somewhere and I'm like, so, they're like, this is team building. And I'm like, team building takes a lot of forms. Like, that's its own thing in and of itself. And that's important, but you also have to be wary of people who don't fit within your team building structure, where you're creating silos of people. You can see this at conferences too, right? It's the great alcohol question, right? Let's always do things around alcohol. Well, that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. You create silos of people who don't necessarily fit, and that can happen at a corporation too, where I don't play video games. I have children. I have, you end up with these things that don't necessarily all gel together, and if you're not careful, I think you may end up with problems that don't rear their ugly. It doesn't rear its ugly head until it's too late, where all of a sudden, wow, why is our attrition rate up? Why are we losing good people? I thought we had a great team structure. And then you're like, because we've defined cultural norms that don't work for our good employees. So we have to be careful with that. I think when you look, and you can't, there is no one blanket means to do that sort of thing. And I think that's the thing that you, as someone who's running a team or doing whatever, you have to find that thing that works, whether that's humor or outings or socially type events or conferences, whatever. But don't think that you can read a blog post and go, this is our new culture.
Yeah. Culture has to grow organically, right?
You got to nurture it too. You got to nurture it too. Like, I almost feel like the Missouri team is as good as it is because Carfax started out small and then slowly built up, and then those values of like have a work-life balance have just evolved with the whole thing. And with us being new on the team over in Virginia, it almost seems like it's like a North VA culture to the most important thing you can do is just work. And just grind it out, ship code, but at the same time, your job satisfaction goes down a little bit, and it feels like you're not working as fast as you could have had you just step back a little bit, maybe joked around with your friends and coworkers, relax, maybe not video games, because like you said, you don't want to just build silos of like, okay, we're going to have a Mario Kart culture. No, let's maybe just hang out, take a break, step back from the code, recharge the batteries. So when we come back from our break, we're fresh, we're ready to go. That problem we were stuck on, we forgot about the approach we were doing, and we're coming up with a new approach and just coming in fresh and gaining velocity that way.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, you do have to step away from problems. I mean, you've all probably experienced as well as I have, where you grind on a problem too long and you've lost the perspective to understand what the actual problem was. How many of, you walk away. It's the great, shower idea, right? You're in a shower, your mind is not thinking, and then all of a sudden you end up with that kick. And like, oh, I know how to solve that problem I worked 2 hours yesterday on. I can solve it in 15 minutes. The kicker with work-life balance stuff is that a lot of times that I see, like, oh, look, all right, my company has great work-life balance. Look at all these benefits and things that we give. Oh, what happens if you take those benefits? You are shunned, right? Like, that's a thing that happens. Oh, well, we give you those benefits, but you're not really supposed to take advantage of them. To me, it's very counterintuitive these days. And I think it's a little bit of bait and switch in some organizations where, oh, we've got great work-life balance, but by the way, you really need to work 85 hours a week and do all this. Like, that's not conducive to productivity, like from a, happiness standpoint, let alone a, just like why? Like, if you're having to do that, then you've done something wrong. And that comes from the top level. Like, you get there and go, oh, well, that's your fault. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, that's a thing that someone defined above you and said, hey, this is the way it's going to be. And culturally deal with it, or otherwise you're out. And that's very difficult, I think, for some folks. Because you're right. Happiness level goes, and then no amount of jokes and or 15-minute break is going to resolve that problem.
Yeah, I've seen it at different places, like not here at Carfax, but where I've had it where exactly that. Like, yeah, sure, I'll go play foosball. But then there's people who aren't in your development group who are like in the business or research or whatever, and they're watching, and they don't understand that culture because you've siloed these culture pieces, where it's not the whole company is a whole company with certain values, but each group organizes itself. And so then there's this whole like, well, why are the developers slacking off and getting all this stuff? And it turns into not a very happy place to work.
Nothing to do with the job posting. We're a work hard, play hard company, and then they forgot about the play hard part once you start working there.
There is another thing here. I think that there is a need for a certain level of trust between people in the team or in the teams, because we're having a lot of laughs by just reading the code. So we find out so many Easter eggs. At one point, one colleague of mine said to me, "Can you please come to my computer?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So he was telling me, "I don't want to blame you, but what is this line of code?" And I was like, "What? This is just stupid. Ternary operations, 2 or 3 chains ternary operations," but it was just a mess. And we had a really good laugh because the variable names were all messed up and everything was, and we were laughing by just reading the code. And take this, but you need a certain level of trust if somebody to tell you that you just wrote the code, So you need that level of trust. But there is another thing. I found a lot of, during my experience, I found a lot of Easter eggs. At one point, I found a line saying that I'm sorry for the following lines, but at the time when I implemented them,
oh my God, I've seen that.
There was no other way to do it. So I apologize for the people that have to fix this. So the people that are developing the kernel for Linux are doing this for like since forever. You know that there are some measures about some certain words in the Linux kernel, and they kind of dropped the number.
I love it when you go into those code bases though, and you see like like there's like a paragraph of a rant on why they made this code and why, you know, something broke in this one browser, and it's not their fault. And then it just remains a comment and a to-do underneath. There's no like action, like, you know, you can't look at the log, see that disappear in the next commit and with a PR or something. It just always stays there. And so like you can read through a code base, some of them, and see like people who were just angry and didn't want to fix it, clean up the code better than when you first got there. That whole clean it up when you leave. Yeah, that doesn't happen with these things because people are like, oh, well, after reading that rant, I don't know if I want to even deal with this.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience where someone did a workaround, commented that it was a workaround, and said they were terrified to touch the code they were working around. So I'm like, all right, great. I don't want to go anywhere near this thing now. And then either like, okay, do I need to do a workaround on their workaround? Do I need to start at their code? How much time do I have before release can actually tackle the whole problem? But yeah,
just add another comment.
Well, and I think that, again, see, to me, that's developer happiness problems. Like I see that, like when I see workaround to-dos, like I question whether or not, like who wrote the estimate. Because to me, like to-dos and workarounds that happen are often because engineers don't have time. Like if you're a developer and you're like, I need to work around this, well, why don't you just understand the block below it? Is that because A, they didn't have enough time, or B, they don't understand the project well enough to understand what that thing actually did? And that could be, I mean, it could be both. It could be one or the other. It could be a number of factors. But every time I see a to-do, I immediately question the entire chain that occurs. Because to me, when you see too many of those, when you see a lot of workarounds and sort of patchwork things, you're going to end up with developers that have massive problems, because at some point it becomes all a patchwork. And if you've worked in legacy code with projects that have code bases that are, 10 years old, which, that can be a nightmare, where you're going through and trying to resolve this bigger problem, but you don't have time to understand it. You kind of get an idea of where it is. You ask for time to fix it. They say there's not budget to fix it, but it still has to be fixed. And then you end up with a patch, or you end up with this workaround. And then the next developer, their happiness goes down. And the next one, their happiness goes down. And all of a sudden it becomes an even larger project than had they just fixed it correctly the first time. So a lot of times when you have business analysts or anyone who's working on the project side who can deal with client requirements and things, you really have to sometimes say, if engineers are saying, hey, we really need more time for this, this is a much larger problem than it is foreseen, or this is something that hasn't been touched in 5 years, like we definitely need to step back and understand this as a whole, you should probably try to give them a little bit more time. Because if there's anything that's very hard to do in this business, it's estimating things. The more time you've given that, the less patch and to-dos you end up with, at least in the client side of life.
It's a great point, because I'm looking back now after your comment on that, and I'm thinking to myself, those places where I saw that code, I honestly didn't last very long after that code base was at that degree, at that level. And then now I'm looking at like the projects I did here, like this most recent project I did. I can't talk about like the details, but it was interesting because there's not a lot of that, right? And developers would just create their own tickets in our ticketing system to do stuff that was related because they had to do it to clean it up. But in previous jobs I've been at, you don't do that. It's like, just get the stuff I asked you to do done. And
True.
Here, I guess one of the reasons that I like working here too is that I'm collaborating more with people who care, for lack of a better way to explain it.
Well, and you have to be careful too, because I think that a lot of developers care a lot, and sometimes that is in conflict with the thing that has to be done. And
yes,
that's
thank you
tough.
for clarifying.
Yeah, I mean that's a very hard thing, because they're sitting there going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it this way.
I want to fix it, but it's going to take me twice as long.
Right. I it touches this, and then QA is going to do that, and then I have to write another harness and blah, 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 blah. And it's not that, I think that comes out sometimes in the review process too, which, can be hard depending on how you do that sort of thing, because all of a sudden you're sitting there going, why did you do it this way? Well, I ran out of time. And then people get docked for, oh, you should ask for more time. I did ask for more time. And then, they said no. And I was like, oh, well, it's still your fault. And then you get blamed, and then you go back to doing what you're supposed to be doing, dumbfounded and, dejected over the fact that you're not getting any help from the people who ideally should help you do your job better, because it requires teamwork as a whole. And sometimes, when you don't end up with cross-functional teams and you don't have this, you don't have that mix where you don't understand the user conversation. I mean, so, a lot of times here's my requirement. Just build me this thing. Well, why, out of curiosity, why do the users ask for that? It's not your concern. That's a horrible answer to tell any developer. Of course it's their concern. They're building things for users. So,
yeah,
if you're not, and I know we've all seen this. I mean, again, you've been around for a little bit. You've probably seen a little bit of this, and it happens. How you deal with it and how you maintain your happiness level after that can be hard.
So, guys, I have a really funny story about people that you work with. I have been incredibly lucky to work with people that were real mentors, because during my junior years, I've been writing so much bad code that I am extremely surprised that I'm still alive. So I've been working on one project, and I was using Java to develop it. And as a junior, you use a lot of system outs, and probably you're familiar with what happens when you write system out. Nobody agrees with writing system out, so I was using it for logging. And at one point, my technical leader was saying, okay, we can no longer have system outs in our application, and I'm going to remove them. So he deleted the system outs, and the application just broke. The application no longer worked. It was a Java server application that stopped working by removing. So what I was doing in a for loop, I was printing out an increment. And by removing the print, so the increment could not reach at one point, and there was an array stuff and an index out of bounds or something like that. But it was really funny. But looking back, it was, I don't know, bad code. I'm surprised that I didn't got fired for that, But everybody laughed, and this is the idea. It really matters the people that you work with and how much they can make. They can create a fun environment, and they can, take a bad example and wrap it in a funny way and just expressing it to constructively, not destructively. Yeah, I have been doing so much bad code back then. So, when you're doing Java, you have a lot of try-catch. So I had to try-catch, accessing the file. There was no way to access the file. There were defaults that were taken out of the database. I can see Eric. I tried to access the database, and it was a pyramid of doom of try-catches. At one point, the last catch, there was no other way, there was no other workaround to get the configuration. There was no file, there was no database, there was nothing. So in that catch, I just let a comment. At this point in the application, there is no reason to execute it. And system out, and I just system exit the application, and that's all we can do. And just take it as a funny example.
I think everybody has, I look at code I wrote last week and go, wow, last week I must have had a bad week. Because when you start out, you're like, yay, I'm coding. And then you're like 6 months later, wow, I had no idea what I was doing with that. And then another 6 months go by and I'm like, wow, was I ever good at my job? That's a thing. I think that as you improve over time, you question your former self, what was I thinking at the time? There are better ways to do this. And then if you're in Java, you're like, nah, there's no better way to do this because it's Java and
That was you looking back. That was you looking back on your good day, looking back on that one terrible day where everything had to get done and everything else was on fire. So
You're sitting there going, where did C come from? Are we doing this in C?
Why is there an error saying this should never happen, exploding in production right now?
Those are the best.
There are those times when you just feel like take money out of your account and give back to the company. Just take it will make me feel much better. Just take the money. I don't deserve them.
Eric, I see you whispering, but I don't think I can hear you. You're shaking your head now, yes? Shake. No. No words.
If you shout, probably we can hear from Tyler's microphone.
Yeah, better move over so there's no echo.
But that's not a friendly environment, right? Nobody's going to have fun.
So we're running up against time. Is there anything that we have not covered in today's episode that we probably should cover amongst the willows and things?
So I was just saying that, I was saying nothing important. I forgot what I was saying.
Well, I was saying, is there anything else we should cover before we wrap up today's wonderful episode about happiness and the things that we do to maintain it?
Yeah, I mean, just making sure I make enough time for the things I do outside of work, like my family, like the going out and spending time with my son and daughter and my wife. That's really helpful for me. But at work, like I really enjoy just getting coffee with people, even if it's inside the workplace. So like going to the coffee machine or water cooler or whatever. Have you guys done that sort of?
Everybody does this. So you just need networking to be sane, right?
I mostly just have people wheel me around. I just sit in my chair all day. They wheel me places. That gets hard because we don't have an elevator. So getting up the stairs becomes, a battle or an expedition, depending on how good you look at it. I think any meeting place that you can have where you can have some conversation about things that are not your job is probably a good thing. In the States, it has a tendency to be, a lot of people tie their identity to their job, and that can be problematic, right? You're more than your job. You have family and hobbies and the things that you do on the outside of it. And when you work stacks upon stacks of hours, if you lose sight of that, you can have that feeling of burnout, which, is horrible. And two, that you don't end up with, you don't end up in a very happy state, and sometimes you don't know why. I've seen that time and again where people, you just need to go home, go see someone, go to a movie, do something that generally makes you happy. And if that's getting a cup of coffee and standing there and going, I hate looking at your face. Yeah, HR may not like that, but at the same time, and sure, maybe that's not the nicest thing to say, and maybe the golden rule applies, but hopefully you get through it. And then you find that little bit of joy that keeps you going.
It's important to have that balance. Even still, I'm guilty. I'm trying to get better at it, where I'm more than just my job. And then when you have a bad phase or you just plateau, you almost start to have like an existential crisis to like, what is my worth as a human being at that point? And that's, you need that balance to make sure you don't go down that dark rabbit hole. But for me personally, just being able to pair program has just been huge. Just relating to someone else that's struggling through the same things together, and just you kind of having banter back and forth, bringing a little bit of humor, making everything go much easier.
Well, it's been a magical episode about happiness and the things that sort of drive us home here amongst our various jobs as developers and engineers. If they want to find you on the onlines, where should they find us, people?
Everybody can associate me with monkuser.com from now on. So I have all the links there. So yeah, I'm the Monk User.
Well, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And hopefully, as we go off into a holiday next week here in the United States, Thanksgiving, hope your travels are safe as we wrap up here. Currently, episode 115 of the Web Platform Podcast. Humor, leisure, and keeping sane at work. We have been Eric, Justin, Tyler, Danny, Stefanache. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone, have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody. See ya.
Thank you for having me.
You want to learn more about what's coming on next on the Web Platform Podcast? Follow us on Twitter at the Web Platform, or on Google Plus and YouTube at Plus the Web Platform. We also need your help in creating transcripts of the episodes and helping to create open source projects under our GitHub organization. Contact Eric Isaacson at eIsaacson
or Danny Blue at D_Blue. That's DEE_BLOO.
Thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you all next week.